Many science fiction and fantasy stories involve the manipulation of time, whether it's traveling through time or stretching time out to allow the characters more experiences than the normal person. The best stories, though, have an understanding that time should be paired with another factor, that being space. And it's not entirely fictional. I'm Ollamh, and welcome to Geek Trivia. To start off looking at a fictional work we've talked about before, Piers Anthony's Incarnations of Immortality, specifically the novel Bearing an Hourglass. In this story, a normal human being takes on the incarnation of time, which understandably gives him power over time. He can move time forward and backward, he can travel to different times, and addresses the major problem with such travel. If a person were to travel 6 months into the future, but without traveling through space as well, they would wind up floating in a void. The Earth would be on the other side of the sun, in the most simplistic realization of movement. The entire solar system is traveling 514,000 miles per hour. So the Earth would be on the other side of the sun, which in turn is going to be 2,195,808,000 miles away from its current position. Taking just those two factors into account, traveling 6 months in time without traveling through space would be catastrophic. Piers Anthony understood this and reasoned that the office holder of time would thus have to be able to travel through space as well. The two would have to be linked in order to not have the office holder floating in empty space and potentially completely lost in space. Now, time travel isn't the only fictional example we have for a connection between time and space. For our next example, we're going to visit the Discworld series by Sir Terry Pratchett. There are a few novels in which the history monks appear, but one really focuses on them and their unusual abilities, the Thief of Time. This novel follows Lobsang Lud and his mentor Lutze. The history monks have the ability to slice time, allowing them to have minutes or even an hour's worth of experiences in a single second. It would be easy to say, oh, that's all done with magic and be done. But Pratchett describes it further and differently. It's described as shaping time around the monk, meaning that time is affecting an area of space differently. The more advanced monks can shape the slice even tighter, meaning they get more experience in that second. Time is affecting a smaller area of space, meaning it can be stretched further. Think of it this way. Reality is represented by an orange. All of space is the flesh of the orange, while the skin is a second worth of time. If you were to peel off the skin, keeping it whole, you would wind up with a ribbon of the skin, or ribbon of time. That skin could then be dragged across a small portion of the flesh, or reality, and it would experience more of the skin than the rest of the flesh. The tighter you slice the ribbon, the less of the flesh it would come in contact with, but the more that small section would actually experience. This is what the history monks do. They stretch out time by reducing the amount of space that it is applied to. Now, they have to be careful when shaping the slice and make sure that the ribbon doesn't break. Otherwise, there's no time applied to their section, and that generally ends up with the history monk exploding. Pratchett actually visits this idea from the other side in the novel Making Money, and the artifact known as the Cabinet of Curiosities. The cabinet has almost an unlimited number of drawers and can unfold itself massively. In order to study it, the wizards of the Unseen University need a lot of space, a lot more than any individual room available. They get around this by compressing time. The room in which they research the cabinet is in a field of compressed time, which allows them to expand space. Taking an hour and compressing it down so they only have half an hour of experience would allow them to possibly double the usable amount of space without affecting the surrounding parts of the building. He doesn't go into as much detail about how this is done or even describe how it affects people inside the room. But it's reasonable to assume that while for them only half an hour goes by, while the rest of reality may see several hours go past. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, well, this is fantasy and has no basis in reality, so they can do whatever they want. But that would actually be incorrect. In fact, this is the basis of time dilation in Einstein's theory of relativity. When thinking of the correlation between time and space, what better to look at than speed? Speed is literally the calculation of how much space you experience in a certain amount of time. Whether it's miles per hour, kilometers per second, or nearly 6 trillion miles per year. The idea states that when a person travels close to the speed of light, time affects them differently. And the closer to the speed of light, the more pronounced that difference becomes. Does that sound like the cabinet room to anybody else? Granted, the wizards weren't dealing with as large an amount of space, but it's a similar idea. In the real world, we'd need a lot more space than in even a mile-wide room. We'd need literally an astronomical amount of space. Looking at speed as the relation between the amount of space a person would experience in a certain amount of time, the more space experienced in that time would cause time to affect the person differently, much like the assumed effects of the cabinet room. Traveling a year at 90% of the speed of light would cause a time dilation of roughly 2. Meaning that a person experiencing 5,400,000,000,000,000 miles in the span of a single year would age 1 year, while everything else would age 2 years. The dilation, as I said earlier, would be greater the closer to the speed of light that a person is traveling, or the more space they're experiencing in that year. Which begs the question about the monks of history. Would they actually be shaping time around them, or through their technique shirking off the effects of normal space movement? Are they actually managing to slow their movement down so that the time dilation works in reverse? With the theory of time dilation presented through Einstein's theory of relativity, could a person experience more time if they were able to find a way to slow down their own speed? It would require finding a way to separate themselves from the natural movement of the universe, any planet rotation, the pull from the sun, the galaxy, nearly everything. If they were able to decrease their speed by 90%, they would appear to age 2 years in the span of a single year. Granted, it would be hazardous as anything traveling normal speed hitting that person, no matter how small, would do a lot of damage. And that is really the biggest problem with the Discworld time dilation. They are still managing to stay on the planet. Slowing down to experience more time would mean the history monks would have been left far behind the disc, while the wizards should be fired off so far ahead that they would be dead by the time the university caught up with them. So it's not a perfect comparison, but it's an interesting thought experiment nonetheless. So there are examples, both fictional and theoretically real, of how connected time and space are. So what do you think? Does the theory of relativity help make the examples from the Discworld a bit more believable? It's obviously not a one-to-one correlation, but I feel that it makes it a little less pure fantasy and more along the lines of fudging the numbers. I'd love to know what you think. Do you think there's a reasonable connection, or does it strike you as just a bunch of fluff with a broken line between them? I welcome both support and rejection for these theories. It's all about the conversation. So please, leave a comment down below, send us a tweet or a post on our Facebook page, and let me know what you think. As always, thank you very much for watching. And don't forget to press the subscribe button down below so that you can stay tuned for more from Ollamh Productions.
If you wanna see some
Cheerio! He's very obviously an American actor. He just screams all-American good guy, which is why he is best in westerns and sports movies. They form into tribes or clans, with one Kelda or female leader, possibly in reference to the druidic ways of the Scots.